your home for Northeast Ohio soccer. This is Breaking Lanes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Breaking Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Logan Congrove, and joining me today is Mr. Will Meyer. Will, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, the Breaking Lanes podcast is presented by Kronis Academy and the Visual Kingdom, our fantastic partners here at the show. Will, let's waste no time, jump right into it. Talk about what brought you to the game of soccer.
Yeah, so I think that as many kids do, parents put them into it. And I remember playing from a young age and just always enjoying the sport. I played soccer and baseball primarily growing up. And yeah, as I got older, my love for the game expanded, and the rest, I guess, is history.
What would you say your first memory of playing the sport was, whether it was as a goalkeeper or just as a player in general?
So my first soccer memory, I think, was playing rec soccer out in Forest Hills in Cleveland Heights. I remember just loving scoring goals, playing forward. But then also I remember I would play some goalkeeper too. I think that's also where I started playing goalkeeper. But the earliest memory was definitely scoring goals, not saving them.
You got to pinpoint your favorite goal that you've scored before you became a goalkeeper.
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, I think I started playing goalie full time in high school. So I think like maybe middle school was the last time I was out in the green pastures of the forwards world. So I can't really put my finger on that one, but I don't know.
So you just mentioned Solon. Talk about your high school career. You were a 4-year player for the Comets here in the area, Northeast Ohio. What was that like for you growing up in Solon?
Yeah, I think that in Solon at that time, high school soccer was like the pinnacle of what I thought soccer was. I wasn't really involved in the DA at all. The internationals were around, but I played baseball, so I never really was able to play in the spring. So high school soccer was kind of what I was working towards and what I was striving towards. And that's when I first started getting training with Anton, was to try to increase my ability and do well for the high school season with the Comets. But I always had a very good time playing high school soccer. The head coach, Ryan Connor, at the time, he ran a really good program, and it kind of introduced me to what really well-organized soccer was about.
What was your first summer before high school soccer like training-wise?
Yeah, so that summer was when I first started training with Anton, and I had never really had too much goalkeeper specific training. I was just kind of a good athlete, so that's kind of why I was on the better end of goalkeepers. But then starting to train with Anton and his methodology, I remember it being really, really tough at first. My technique wasn't really great. I wasn't in goalkeeper shape. I remember like out at the Force Richmond, where he first started training goalkeepers, I remember being just hunched over that water fountain for what seemed like 20 minutes maybe, and just not wanting to go back. But as the more sessions I got under my belt, the better I started to do. So that was good.
Can you remember a session that might have been one of the tougher ones that you had to go through?
Yeah, I remember Anton used to do this drill where he would just set up cones like diagonally across from each other. And it was when I was learning how to do like the spin. So you would dive and you'd have to spin your legs around and just go to the next one. And my spins, that was never really my forte. So he just kept making me do it over and over and over again. And I just remember just being on my hands and knees, just contemplating my life, contemplating goalkeeping, whether I wanted to play the sport anymore. But yeah, we came out a better man, I guess.
How do you overcome that adversity early on in your training when it feels so tough and you're not really sure where the end in sight might be? How do you overcome that as an athlete?
I think at that time it's more so just your parents telling you got to go. But I think that in all seriousness, that when you can at the youth level, when you can make meaningful strides through sessions and you can see yourself getting better, I think that that's what makes you keep coming back. And I think through Anton's training specifically, I got a lot better very, very quickly. And I think that that's something that really inspired my love for the game. I think that everyone wants to do things that they're good at and things that they can make progress in. And I think that goalkeeping was something like that for me. Training through Anton, seeing my growth, and then seeing that translate onto the field in high school was just an awesome experience. I remember like being able to play my first varsity games, and then doing well and being recognized through the high school organization and all of that stuff. I really enjoyed that. And I think that a lot of that was because of Anton's training and because of being able to raise my level through that.
So talk about your first 2 seasons at Solon, freshman, sophomore year. What were those experiences like? What did you learn maybe, and how did it help you propel you into your junior, senior year going into college?
Yeah, I think for I didn't know this at the time, but I think for goalkeepers, it's just so important to play games and be in the game scenarios. You can train all you want, but nothing can really prepare you for being out there in those games. So I think I didn't know it at the time, but just being able to get games under my belt at a level that maybe pushed me a little bit. I mean, when you get into high school, you're playing against 17, 18-year-olds as a younger kid, like kids who are much older than you. So to kind of get into those experiences and being able to acclimate to that environment is very crucial for development. So just I think that playing games at a level higher than you're playing at before is always going to be very good for your growth. And that's what Solon was to me.
What would you say your toughest game early on for you at Solon was?
I remember the first varsity game that I ever played. Solon would play St. Ignatius every year.
Oh, wow.
And St. Ignatius is probably still is. Yeah, they just won another state title. They are the best team, hands down, in Ohio, and we would play them first game every year. So my very first varsity game ever was against St. Ignatius, and I just remember being so nervous. And we did end up losing. I think it was 2-0, but I had a really good game. And so that kind of got my momentum rolling, thinking, hey, if this is the best team, this isn't too bad.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So heading into your junior, senior year, you're starting to think about college. How were you mentally preparing to go through the recruiting process? What were you doing at Solon to make sure that the eyes were on you?
Yeah, so I think that at that time, high school soccer wasn't the best avenue to play Division I. Like, you would hear about this kid or that kid playing D1, but they were few and far between. Most of, and this is still how it is, like if you want to play Division I, your best route is through the DA. But luckily I was with Cleveland Soccer Academy at the time, which I think they're no longer a club, but there were people in place there that they knew the Division I routes and how to get recruited and things like that. And also Kaz, the old Cleveland State coach, he was there at the time. So him and Kia, they actually helped me a lot to get recruited and things like that. But it also was a struggle, like I said, because I played baseball too.
Right.
And I had a lot of pressure to kind of stop playing baseball and maybe join the DA or focus on playing soccer year round. But I liked baseball a lot, to be honest. Like, that sport will always be true to me or dear to me. So that made it kind of a lot more difficult, to get recruited, not being able to essentially play at all during the spring. But through the help of the people that I had around me, I was kind of able to maneuver my way into the D1 eyes.
Absolutely. You finished your career at Solon playing 56 matches overall. You were a first-team All-Ohio by Cleveland.com. You were the Cleveland.com Goalkeeper of the Year, first-team All-Cleveland, Conference Player of the Year, and first-team All-Conference as a senior. Talk about how those accolades might have helped you and how it felt to receive them.
Yeah, it felt good. I think that that season was kind of it was special because it was just like the culmination of my entire youth soccer career, being able to play with kids that you started playing with 5th, 6th grade. So it kind of meant more in that regard. As far as the accolades, it didn't mean a ton, but it was nice to be recognized for what I was doing. And I think that also just the defense that we had this year or that year, like I said, we had been playing with each other for so long that everything kind of clicked at the end. So I kind of owe those accolades to them as much as me, but it was nice to get those things. Yeah.
So you enter the recruiting process. You said you're looking to go D1. You met with all your coaches. How did it start off for you? What type of schools were reaching out to you? How did you make those connections?
Yeah. So I remember the first thing I at that time, it was kind of no one really, or I didn't have a lot of help. Like obviously I said I had Kia and Kaz and the people in club, but I wasn't really sure what to do in my family. Neither of my mom or my dad played collegiate sports. So that recruiting process was kind of foreign. So I remember sitting down with my dad and just going through just a whole list of schools, and he would ask me, would you play here? Would you play here? And I pretty much was like, yes. So then we just tried to we made like a highlight tape and then just tried to find the emails of all these different coaches and just sent out emails, tried to personalize them to each one, like looking into their program, things like that. And to the kids, looking to get recruited now, I think that that's actually a really good point, is you can't just send the same email to every single coach, because they know that, they can see that. I think you need to try to even though you're trying to cast a wide net and maybe see or try to get noticed by a bunch of D1 programs, you want to try to personalize them to each program individually, because that's something that coaches pick up on and notice. So yeah, that's just what I tried to do. I just tried to cast as broad of a net as I could and hope that a few things got through to some coaches.
Who were some of the coaches that reached out to you first after sending out those letters?
I remember I was so Louisville was a big one. Akron at the time, they reached out a little bit, but I kind of wanted to go farther away from home. Cleveland State too, because Kaz was obviously running the club that I was at. And then a big one I remember was Princeton was very and then I remember they told me that I had to get a 30 on the ACT though to get in.
Not quite attainable for you?
So the first time I took it was I got like a 28 without studying or anything. And then Princeton had said that you had to try to get a 30. So I remember my mom and dad being very excited about the prospect of Princeton. So I started all of the tutors and all of that stuff. And I ended up getting the 30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
not me.
Yeah, but it's funny, I went through all of that work and then ended up going to Louisville, which I got in with the 10 ACT.
So talk about some of those early conversations with Louisville. Obviously, that's where you ended up. What was the recruiting process specifically with Louisville like?
Yeah, so I remember that I had to go to an ID camp. So one of the camps where they just bring in a bunch of high schoolers. And so I went to that, and I remember being extremely nervous for that, but I made a really good impression. And then after that kind of led to them offering me a spot on the team.
What were some of the conversations with the coaches like?
Yeah, I remember them just kind of saying like, we're interested. But I like I was kind of alluding to before, I wasn't a huge recruit. Like I wasn't, kind of because I wasn't in the developmental academy and stuff. So I remember them kind of being a little bit tentative, and it wasn't till so I went to this in the winter of my junior year, and they didn't end up giving me an offer to come until the summer. So that was kind of a long time. And then they offered me a walk-on spot. So at first I didn't even start on any scholarship or anything. But when I was debating between where I wanted to go, I kind of decided that I wanted to give the soccer thing the best shot that I could and go play at the best school that I possibly could. So I think that in talking to my parents and things, it made sense to try to chase those dreams at Louisville, because they just had gorgeous facilities. They had really good really good coaching staff. And they had produced some good players, some top draft picks over the years. So I thought that would be the best option. And even though I may not be rated super high now, let me get into that environment and see if I maybe can increase my level.
What's it like being a walk-on when you first start out? How do you make that decision to become a walk-on? And what's the differences between being on scholarship and not being on scholarship at first?
Yeah, I think in soccer, it's a little bit different than maybe like your or how you would traditionally perceive it in like basketball and football. Because it seems like in those sports, like it's very obvious who the walk-ons are and who's on scholarship and who's not. Whereas soccer, like you're not really sure and you don't really discuss it with people. So no one really knows a ton who the walk-ons are and stuff. But I just remember really setting my goal that I wanted to be on scholarship when I came in to Louisville. And so that kind of like drove my hunger a little bit more, seeing these people who came in with me, like knowing that they were probably on a lot of money. And ultimately I did get onto scholarship my second year. So I had a pretty good freshman season in that regard. I accomplished one of my goals.
What was that moment like, finally receiving your scholarship?
Yeah, I remember being called into the coach's office and him just telling me that. And I remember just having the biggest smile on my face, and he was trying to tell me some other stuff. The meeting wasn't just that. He wanted to kind of evaluate some other things. And I just remember not listening to anything he was saying and just smiling cheek to cheek. So that was definitely a really good moment. Yeah.
So you were at Louisville 2017 through 2019. You had 15 matches and you had 13 starts. You had 31 saves, 9 shutouts, and a .77 goals against average. Talk about your experience at Louisville as a whole for the time that you were there.
Yeah, I think that Louisville, it definitely made me a way better goalkeeper. I went through some tribulations for sure. I obviously sat on the bench for more games than I played. And I think that was very tough for me. I think I felt hard done by a lot. I thought that I should be playing in those games that I did play. The majority of those were my second year there, my sophomore season. I did do really well. When I was playing, we got to the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament. And I was playing really, really well. And then I obviously that didn't last. They were playing another goalkeeper over me, but I think that kind of taught me how to deal with failure. I think that's one thing for all athletes going into college that they need to deal with, because up to that point, like especially D1 players, you're the best player on every team that you've ever been on, and you've never even considered not playing. And so then to get that rude awakening almost that, hey, everyone here was the best player and you might have to sit. I think that was a lesson that I definitely needed to learn and to deal with. And so learning that kind of, it humbled me a little bit, and then also kind of inspired me to strive for more and to want to not sit on the bench anymore, and to be the guy somewhere. And ultimately that led to my transfer to Akron.
What did you do personally to overcome that for yourself? You mentioned a lot of people handle it different ways. What did you personally do to kind of overcome being on the bench until it was time for you to not be?
Yeah, I think that I didn't. I had to go somewhere else to play. I think that sometimes you have to learn your lessons the hard way and learn your lessons by doing things the wrong way. And I think that I handled myself at Louisville kind of not the right way in that regard. I wish I could, or a part of me wishes I could have done something a little different. I wouldn't say that I gave up when they didn't, or when I was sitting on the bench for all of that time, but I think that I could have done things differently to kind of get that spot back. But I think that kind of, looking back now at my handling of that situation, I think that prepared me for what I've been through in the pros now, and learning how to deal with those situations at a earlier age than most goalkeepers, I think was a very good lesson for me to learn.
Before we transition to your time at Akron, what was it like making that Elite Eight run with Louisville? How'd that feel to be a part of that, just being the kid from Solon?
Yeah, it was awesome. I think that it was something that I my first year at Louisville, I saw the team. They made it to, I think they made it to the Elite Eight too when I was just a freshman redshirting. That was amazing to see, but you never really grasp the scope of the situation until you're really into it. And I just remember that year, just sitting in my room before going to the game thinking like, man, we have a legitimate chance of making the College Cup here, and just how excited I was. And then playing in that game, it was against Akron actually in the Elite Eight. Yeah. There was a ton of people. It was at Louisville, and that stadium is awesome. I bet there was probably 3,000-4,000 people there, which was the most I had ever played in front of by far. And yeah, the atmosphere was electric, and it was just awesome to play in that high pressure environment. And I remember when I was walking off the field, I was thinking to myself like, man, this is just a feeling that even though we lost, it was just something that I really wanted to do again.
So you're starting to think about transferring. What kind of was the first thing in your head that said it might be time to go somewhere else, and how did you start that process?
Yeah, so I had redshirted my freshman year. So I had a grad year essentially. So I wanted to finish out my degree at Louisville. So once I had finished my degree, I had an extra year left. It felt like I wasn't playing. It felt like a natural conclusion to my time at the University of Louisville. So that's when the transfer portal was brand new, had first come out, so good time to transfer.
Sure.
So yeah, I left on good terms with all the Louisville coaches. I think that that's one thing that the transfer portal does now, which is unfortunate, is it kind of breaks relationships with players and coaches. Don't always leave in the best way. Both sides can be at fault. But with Louisville, I think they knew that I was that I really wanted to play and that I was capable of playing and being the guy at some other program. So I left on good terms with all of those guys. And then, yeah, I remember Akron reaching out and I remember being 7-8 years old and going to the Akron games. And that was kind of the Akron heyday when they had Darlington Nagbe, when Yedlin was playing there, Teal Bunbury. And I remember I remember when Akron hit me up, and all those memories kind of coming back to me, feeling like that was the most unattainable thing as a kid. Like, these guys are superstars. Like, these were the quintessence of the sport in my world. Like, I didn't know anything above that. That was the highest level I thought you could get to. And then them reaching out to me thinking like, hey, I can go do what they all did, or what I was watching growing up. That's an amazing opportunity. And then also, I think I had mentioned earlier how I wanted to kind of get away from the Cleveland area going to undergrad. I think the complete reverse thing happened when I was choosing where I wanted to spend my grad year. I kind of wanted to be a little closer to home, be able to see my family more, and stuff like that. So all of those boxes just check for Akron. So it made my decision honestly pretty easy. And then,
what were the conversations early on with Coach Embick or any of the other coaches on staff like about bringing you to Akron?
Yeah, I remember it was pretty funny. The first thing that they said to me when I came on my visit to Akron, they were like, yeah, we have this video that we usually show to potential recruits. But the last scene on the video is Nico De Vera scoring a penalty kick on you to take Akron to the College Cup. So we've decided we're not going to show that to you. So from the beginning, yeah, and that's kind of how Jared and Jer and that staff, they operate. They're kind of in that sense, they like to kind of joke around and be cool with the players. Not to say that they don't run a professional program, sure, because they 100% do, and that's very obvious by their track record. But I was like, oh, it's going to kind of be like that, joking around with me and stuff. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I'll definitely always remember that.
That's hilarious. That's a great experience. You finally get to Akron. You start going into your first couple of training sessions. What was different between Akron and Louisville?
I think that comparing right when I left Louisville and then when I got to Akron, it was very different. Louisville, they bring a lot of athletic money in. They have big football team, basketball team, all of that stuff brings a ton of money into the university. So then that trickles down to sports like soccer and field hockey and what have you. So at Louisville, we had just the most amazing facilities. Everything was just so, like, you could just tell so much money was pumped into all of that stuff. And the things at Akron were very, very nice, but they just weren't quite at that Louisville level.
Right.
But then on the other side, Akron just has such a long legacy of just being a top team and producing top players. So their culture and their track record was more so the allure of that program, which that's what they used to bring in high quality players. So it was kind of a switch to the allure. But I think that I really admired the legacy that was at Akron and the longevity of the program and the professionalism and all of that stuff. I think that was probably superior to Louisville. And I think that that's the kind of program that I would rather align with, not being kind of baited by the material things almost, but more so focusing on the legacy and the quality of the players and the quality of the coaching.
How did Coach Embick and the other coaches use that culture and that legacy to bring you in personally?
Yeah, I think that for them, it was kind of a easy sell because they knew I was a local kid. And I think that that's why they've had such a good record of bringing in the local talent, because the kids that grow up around Akron understand the scope of how large they are and the sustained culture of success that they've been able to maintain. So me being exactly what I just described, it wasn't that hard of a sell because they knew that I knew what Akron means to this area for soccer.
Talk about Akron. You say Akron has such nice facilities. Of course, the soccer field at Akron is considered one of the nicest in the country. You mentioned multiple times how you grew up watching legendary players play on that field. You finally get to step on it yourself in the goal. What was that feeling like? Yeah,
it was amazing. The only thing was my first year at Akron, so I ended up having 2 years at Akron because of the COVID year, so they gave everyone another year of eligibility. But my first year, it was COVID, so stepping on that field it didn't quite feel the same because there was no fans.
Sure.
And that was like when growing up, I just remember it seemed like there was a million people in that packed into there. So my second year, I was kind of able to experience that stuff when we had a lot of fans and stuff at the games. But it really was a dream come true. And I remember for some reason, whenever I'm warming up for a game and you start out and you're just kind of warming up on your own, for some reason, all those thoughts would always like flood back into my head, like almost every single time. And like, I would just think about how thankful I was to be able to just be stepping on that field that I idolized growing up, and seeing people in the stands and looking at the scoreboard and things like that. Like, it really was a dream come true. And that would be my time to kind of stop and smell the roses and think about how fortunate I was to be playing at the University of Akron.
You mentioned playing during that COVID season. What was it like being a student athlete in that environment?
Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult for sure. You just had to, there was just so many different rules and regulations that you had to follow, and you were on just such a strict schedule. And I think that being a student at that time, I think that the social life is a big allure of college, and something that helps you building your social skills through that, and just interacting with other people, and just going about the college life is very important for people. And for all of us to kind of be stripped of that, I think that was kind of the biggest thing. And then also, obviously, at the beginning, when it was at its height, we weren't able to train as a full team. We had to like split up into groups, and it felt weird. It didn't feel right. And it was also harder to kind of develop relationships with the people on your team in that environment, because you don't even get to see half of the team most of the days. Yeah.
So stepping away from the negatives of COVID, going into the positives of your mega senior season at Akron, talk about your last year at Akron, your last year of eligibility. Kind of how did that play out for you?
Yeah, it was do or die. At that time, I kind of realized that I really wanted to keep playing soccer, and I thought that I was good enough to play in the professionals or at the professional level. So it was kind of my last chance. And so I knew I had to have a really good year. And fortunately, I was kind of able to put together a string of performances in which led to me getting drafted.
So talk about the draft experience. When you were considering going pro, you're in your last year at Akron. Did you talk to any of your coaches about maybe the possibility of that? And how did it come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think about halfway through the season, I had put some good performances together, and I started to have some agents reaching out to me via messages, Instagram, whatever. And then that's when it kind of started to click for me. Hey, I think this is something that is attainable. And Jared, Coach Embick and Jer and them, they've seen this so many times. They've had so many professional players go through the ranks that's a very comforting thing to have, to kind of ask them like, hey, what should I be doing during this process? How do I go about picking an agent? Do I need an agent? What should I be reaching out to coaches now? Like, what should I be doing? So they were a very calming presence. And I think that they did a good job of telling me like, hey, I'll worry about all that stuff after the season. Like, your job now is to perform on the field. Don't get caught up in any of these things. And we had a couple players on that team that were kind of going through the same thing. And I think that we all kind of did a good job of kind of putting away those professional ambitions for the sake of the team, because that's ultimately how you raise your stock and do all that stuff. It's not getting caught up in the pro ambition. It's kind of focusing on the task at hand.
So how did the draft process kind of play out for you? You decide you are going to go into the draft. Did you have any conversations with coaches? What is it like to be in the process of maybe being picked to the MLS? Yeah.
So after the seasons, how the draft worked then, I think it still works like this now, was that you had to, an MLS team had to put your name into the draft. So not everyone could be selected. You had to have interest from MLS teams to be put into the pool of eligible players. And so I remember after the season was over, I went and did a combine at the New York Red Bulls. They invited a bunch of college players and stuff, and I remember just absolutely smashing that. Like, I did very, very well there. And I think that word kind of got out from that combine. So then it was just kind of waiting for the draft. My agent kind of teams would reach out to him, and you'd kind of have like, he would introduce you to them, and you would talk to some people. They would kind of conduct little interviews and stuff like that. And then it was draft night, and it's kind of not knowing. I had a pretty good idea that I would be picked at some point, but I just wasn't really sure exactly when that was going to be. So I remember I had gone to a couple of combines, and then the MLS draft, like the mock drafts started coming out, and seeing, like, when I would see myself on there, like that would really give me a lot of hope, and like, hey, I think that this might actually happen. Because before that, like, that was my goal, and that was something that I felt like I could reach. But nothing's certain until it actually happens. So at that point I felt like, hey, I think this might actually happen, which was just an amazing feeling.
What did you do for your draft night? What was your experience like?
So I remember my parents saying that they were like, do you want to have a bunch of people over? Do you want to, like, we could kind of have a little bit of a party, whatever. And at that point I was still like feeling a little bit superstitious. Like, I don't know if this really will happen. And what if we invite a bunch of people over and then I don't end up getting picked? Like, that would just suck. So, I chose to just have my immediate family, and we just sat around and we watched the draft. And that was probably one of the best nights of my life, to be honest. Seeing my name go up, and then we celebrated, and it was just an amazing family moment, like something great to share with your intimate family, for sure.
Absolutely. You get picked 10th overall in the second round by Nashville SC. Talk about when the call came through. How, you mentioned you were super excited. What was the call like for you?
Yeah, so I remember it was the GM called me, and he basically said what you see on the NFL draft and stuff, like, hey, we want to reach, how are you? We want to welcome you to Nashville. We want you to come to our club. And yeah, it was awesome. And then there was just, after that, and it went up, there was just, like, that's the most my phone has ever vibrated before. It's just so many people congratulating and wanting to know what's up and all this stuff. It was just an amazing moment.
What was your first year with Nashville SC like? How was it different from college? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, the players are a lot better. Honestly, I kind of wish I could have changed the way that I went about my time in Nashville, because up to that point, like even up to my senior season at Akron, I wasn't really sure that I was even good enough to play professionally. Like obviously sitting on the bench at Louisville and then not having the best first COVID year at Akron. I kind of felt more so just like lucky to be there almost. Whereas I feel like I should have at that point known that that's where I belong, and that's an environment that I can have a real impact on. But because it's just crazy going from like your locker room at Akron, 18, 19-year-old kids, then you show up to Nashville and you have guys who are 37, 38, like seasoned MLS guys. It's just such a switch. And it's something that's very, very tough to prepare for. So I think that it was a huge shift. And then the players are miles better in their understanding of the game and all of these things. But it was so cool to see. But I think that I kind of had I'm lucky to be here mentality, whereas I should have had a more I belong here mentality.
Absolutely. Was there anybody in the locker room that you kind of like flocked to early on to like learn from? Maybe another goalkeeper that was in the locker room or a field player, anybody that when you first got there, you felt most welcome by?
Yeah. I think that it was cool. There was that was an amazing team to go to, because at that time Nashville was kind of their approach was kind of get more veteran guys and have them kind of carry the team through. Guys who had seen the MLS, knew what it took to win, all of these things. So there was the roster was kind of an older group of players, which was awesome because those guys are very welcoming, and they've seen young guys come through before, things like that. But the entire goalkeeper room at Nashville was very welcoming to me. You had Joe Willis, who he's still playing there now. He's had probably a 20-year career at this point. He's been one of the mainstays at goalkeeper in the MLS. And then you had this guy, another vet, Brian Meredith. He was a longtime player. He's retired now. And then another guy, Elliot Panico, who has now been in the league for a really long time. And all of those guys were immensely welcoming to me. They made me feel at home, and at that age, I was kind of like a sponge. Like I wanted to just know as much as I could from all of those guys, seasoned pros. So they were very accepting of me, and I was very willing to learn from them and kind of ask them about the various tricks of the trade. And then also with the older kind of roster that I discussed, you can see in real time what goes into being a pro and maintaining your status in the MLS for that amount of years. Just seeing like what they did before training, like what they would eat, how they carry themselves, what they would do after training to recover. You really saw all the things that went into being a true pro that maybe you didn't see as much at the college level, because guys that age they don't know what it takes to sustain a 20-year professional career.
What was your first year at Nashville SC like in training on the field? You spent 1 year there. What was the overall experience like for you?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I think being in the MLS was my ultimate goal. And so to be a part of that organization and to be a part of a team with kind of, like I said, older players that were established and that I was watching on TV before coming was an amazing experience. And then that year, Hani Mukhtar, he was on Nashville. He was the MVP of the MLS that season. Wow. So yeah, to kind of see that, come to work every day and see the best player in the league kind of have his MVP season was an amazing thing. But I learned a lot. I think that kind of what I alluded to earlier is just being in a really good environment just raises your level. You have to acclimate to that environment, and you kind of have no other choice but to raise your level. And I think that definitely happened to me at Nashville. I kind of understood what it took to be a professional, and I saw that both on and off the field. So on the field, I felt like I got a lot better as a player, and I made some pivotal steps in my development in that first year.
So you transitioned from Nashville SC over to New York Red Bulls. You play in the MLS Next Pro League. What was that like after you get the professional experience with Nashville SC, meeting all those veteran guys? You head to the MLS Next Pro in New York. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I had that really good combine performance at the New York Red Bulls when I had first left college before the draft. So that's kind of what got me in the door at the Red Bulls. Yeah, so that was I didn't have like the greatest year at New York Red Bulls, but I was in the first, so I was on the second team, the MLS Next Pro team there. But most of the time I was training with the first team there, which was once again a really great experience. And while I didn't have the best year, like I didn't get to play a ton of games for the second team and things like that, and I kind of felt a little hard done by. They kind of explained the situation to me a little bit differently than how it actually went. But I think to draw positives from it, I was around a first team environment again, pretty consistently. And like I said before, just being in that environment with those quality of players, you have no choice but to kind of raise your level and adapt.
and you spent your most recent year with NYFC. Talk about that experience for you. How was it different from Nashville and the other club in New York, the Red Bulls?
Yeah, so New York City FC was a really good experience. I think that last year was my favorite year of my 3 in professional soccer. So the goalkeeper coach at NYCFC 2, he was actually my goalkeeper coach for my first 2 years at Louisville.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was kind of it was nice to be reunited with him because he was the one that recruited me out of high school. And so he brought me in kind of from Louisville when I wasn't a super sought after recruit. He kind of believed in me and all this stuff. So it was really awesome to be able to kind of reunite with him, to keep my career kind of going, and being in an MLS environment again was awesome. And I got to play some more games than I did at my Red Bulls or during my time at Red Bulls. So yeah, it was a really good year, but being a Midwestern boy, I think that Manhattan and the New York, New Jersey area is kind of a lot, and something that I'm kind of trying to get away from now. But you never know until you try, you know. And some people that we know, like they love Manhattan and stuff, but not quite.
Yeah, too big for people from around here. Before we get ready to close out, we'll transition into another topic. Obviously, Kronis Academy, one of our sponsors here for the podcast. Talk about your experiences with Anton and Kronis Academy and how it has kind of propelled your career.
Yeah, so I've been training at Kronis Academy and with Anton for, I think, over a decade now. And I think that without finding Anton from a young age, I think that I would not be the goalkeeper that I am today. I think that the younger you can start with Anton, the better. The way that he teaches goalkeeping and gives you a foundation for your technique and all the things that go into being a good goalkeeper. I think that there's no one better than the Kronis Academy and Anton. I think the methodology is very good for young goalkeepers, and I think it shaped me, and it continues to shape me as I keep coming in here to train, because it's just a great environment, and I feel so at home.
It's a lot of different stops for you, and Kronis Academy obviously has played such a big part. What would you say training at Kronis Academy is? How is it different from anywhere else that you've been? What's so special about being in this facility?
Well, I think this facility, it feels like a family to me. Being here for so long, like I remember training with Abdel when Abdel was still in college, and he was just making Kronis.
Wow.
Yeah, so that kind of that family feeling is just something that I haven't gotten anywhere else. And that's why whenever I come back to the Cleveland area, I always make sure to stop in here. And that's why I'll continue to wear the Kronis gloves and proudly represent this company, because they've done a lot for me, and I owe a lot of success to Kronis. And I've also seen Kronis grow up. I've seen it start out and grow to what it is now, which is just incredible. And I hope that, and I know that Kronis will continue to strive for new heights and reach places that no other glove brands have.
What was your first glove that Abdel ever put you in?
I'm not exactly sure what it was called.
Everybody has given that same exact answer when I asked that question.
But I think would it have been 2010? Yeah, I think it would have been for the 2010 World Cup. He had this glove, and it had these like arrows going up the fingers, and they were like all different colors. And it was his World Cup edition glove. So maybe we can get a picture of that or something. But yeah, I just love those gloves. And I remember I kept asking Abdel, like, are you still going to make these gloves after the World Cup? And I'm not exactly sure why they were the World Cup edition, like other than the World Cup being out. They didn't have any sort of other World Cup ties. But yeah, those were awesome gloves. And I remember putting them on for the first time, being like, wow, these are awesome. And I think ever since then, I don't think I've ever... I wore Kronis from that point on. I've been wearing Kronis for a long time, and he's produced some really good gloves. I think the other one that comes to mind is he molded these ones after the gloves Victor Valdez wore during his, I think they were kind of like Nike gloves, and he kind of took that as a base and kind of put his own spin on it and made gloves that kind of replicated that. And those were the gloves that I wore my senior year at Akron, and I really like those gloves as well.
What is your favorite glove of all time that you've worn, and what are you currently wearing from Kronis?
So from Kronis, I'm currently wearing the Lena. I've been wearing those for my entire professional career, actually. And I think that those are my favorite gloves. I think that I know what I'm going to get from them. They've served me well. They have great grip, great durability. And I think I'm going to continue to rock the Lena until they go out of stock.
Excellent choice. Will, I like to give everybody a chance before we close out to thank people that have helped you throughout your journey, kind of just been there for you through everywhere that you've stopped. So I'll give you the floor. Anybody that you want to shout out from your soccer journey?
Yeah, I think first, being in the Kronis Academy, shouting out Anton and Abdel. I think that from a young age, they kind of saw potential in me when not a lot of people did. They obviously helped me out with gloves and training and all of that stuff, so I owe a big shout out to them. And then all of the people that were involved in my Cleveland soccer journey, people at Solon, people at Cleveland Soccer Academy, and then my college coaches, and then mostly just my family, my mom and my dad. They always believed in me. They always thought that what I was doing was the right thing, and they always backed my ability to figure out my journey and to make mistakes and to persevere and to grow. So I think I owe the most to them.
And last question for you. When was the decision made for you to grow out your hair?
Well, so I grew out my hair when I was a senior in high school. That was the last time I had long hair. And I always felt like that was the most me version of myself. So I kind of wanted to get back to that. So we've been going on, I think, 2 years now, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. And I don't think there's a haircut in sight. So we'll see how long we can get it.
What do you do as a goalkeeper to keep it out of your face throughout the game?
Yeah, it's honestly kind of tough. But if you just put it up, put the headband on, and hope for the best.
You're all set.
Yeah.
Well, Will, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate you spending the time here today.
Of course, man. It's great being on here.
And once again, the Breaking Lanes podcast is presented by Kronis Academy and the Visual Kingdom. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the Breaking Lanes podcast. And before I forget, Will, where can listeners find you personally?
Listeners can find me personally on Instagram at Will Meyer 111. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Once again, thank you, Will, for being on. Thank you, Robby Vallarelli from the Visual Kingdom. And we will see you next time on the Breaking Lanes podcast. Excellent. 52.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun.
I gotta have you sign. Everybody I've had on has signed it.
You just put that on the table.
Yeah.
Do you know that you're in video games?
Yeah. One FIFA.
No, you're in 3 versions of Football Manager.
Oh, really?
Play the
Let's
game all
go.
the time. Well, you're in the 2024 version, and you've been in there since 2022.
Nice. Yeah, I remember when I got the Ultimate Team card.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was like the peak of my existence. I was like, I made sure to get the hard copy of that FIFA. So
I bet, dude.
All my kids, I'll sit them down.
Look, that was me.
All right. You can sign anywhere you want.